Hi, I'm Marijke.
And I'm Jennifer.
And this is Guest Chats!
What is something that would ring alarm bells or people should watch out for if they go and see a speech therapist?
Usually in places,
He's looking out for us. Go on, Fricky.
usually in places, speech and language therapists are qualified.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have gotten the job if they weren't qualified. But it doesn't hurt to sometimes check, right? And then the CORU registration is really, really important because they're the regulatory body. They're protecting the public. So in the speech and language registry on CORU, clients can look up the therapist to check that they are registered. Now, obviously, sometimes it's in their maiden name.
Yeah.
Sometimes in a married name, so don't necessarily assume that they're not there. But that would be really important.
Yeah. And you should be able to get their CORU number to be able to cross-reference with the CORU number as well. Because speech and language therapist is a protected title in Ireland. So if somebody's calling themselves a speech and language therapist and does not have
Or
a registration,
or
a speech therapist, and they're not
protected as
registered
well.
with CORU, then they are not supposed to be practicing speech and language therapy without that.
They're not allowed.
Yeah,
And then
exactly.
they're not, the public is not protected against them. So that's really important. Then there's maybe more minor things, but if I was taking my child to a speech therapist, good luck to them. I always get really nervous when another speech and language therapist brings their child to me for therapy. But what I'd be looking out for is, are they clearly explaining what they are doing and why? And if they're not, I ask them, and they at least need to outline kind of clear ideas, where also discuss things with me and my concerns, and take that into account when setting the goals and agreeing those goals together. That's really important. Then it really depends on the age of the client, isn't it?
Yeah.
When it's a really small kid, sometimes you hear of a 2-year-old where the therapist just had him at the table for a half an hour and then said, we need to have him assessed for ADHD because he can't sit still.
sit still and he's
But
2
he's
years
2.
old. Yeah.
No 2-year-old can sit still for that length of time. So it's really important that happens, and yes, the medical model versus the more social model, things have changed in the years. An old school kind of thing was, I sit here and I show you how to do and drill and drill and drill. There's no fun in games. You're just going to do your thing. Where we've evolved as a profession. It's not a very young profession, but not a very old profession, I should say. Very young profession still. But we've learned tips and tricks. And if you see somebody doing the old style therapy of here's a worksheet and you're a young child, no.
Yeah.
That's tricky, isn't it? And somebody who's maybe not looking at evidence-based therapy, so doing
It's kind of
things-
stuck in the old ways rather than pushing themselves into the future of speech and language therapy. I think, you have to. You might know, though, as a parent, you might not know. Okay, sitting at a table with a worksheet at 2 or 3 isn't the way to go, because we know that. But I think also it's not an issue of this is a deal breaker, but I think something that is important is how well you connect with the therapist themselves, because you might go to one therapist and you get on really well and everything just gels together, and then with another therapist their demeanor might be different, or it might not click with you, and you never know.
And that's okay if it doesn't match.
And we've had that case where I've had clients go to you've had clients go to me, and it's just with our personalities and our style of working with kiddos might be a little bit different, and so I think you want to be comfortable with the SLT that's working with your child and working with you as well.
Exactly. And maybe another key factor is don't necessarily think a nervous therapist is a bad therapist. I always take a nervous therapist as a therapist who cares.
Yeah.
Who really cares about your opinion. You don't want blasé.
Yeah.
But I really like it, especially in the beginning when therapists first learn. There's a nervous energy about it because they want to do a good job.
Yeah.
And sometimes they get a bit of flack for that, but I don't think that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
Because they are going to
Absolutely.
do more.
Yeah,
They're going
and-
to look into more and improve.
And even with that, the idea that a brand new grad is not worth the same as an experienced therapist, where an experienced therapist, yes, they have years behind them. The new grad has all the new research, and you know, I'm always encouraging people to say, I don't know, let me find out and get back to you. That's the kind of therapist you want, somebody who's willing to own what they know and what they don't know, and is willing to do the research to help your kiddo out. So I think it's more about your connection with the therapist and their style, and if that style works with your mindset.
Yeah, and your child, because you know sometimes you get a mismatch and you get a therapist who goes, well, I have the professional qualifications and I'm telling you now we should do it this way. But as a parent, you know your child will not work with that. They're upset, it's not working, whatever it is. That should be a signal going, this is wrong. Just because you're a professional doesn't mean you're correct. And doesn't mean you necessarily have that specific experience. So sometimes it's about seeing if there's actually, and trust your gut as a parent. If your child is happy and engaged,
and
great,
and running into the therapy room excited, then you've got a good system going. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. But the ones who are crying their heads off, if a child cries in a session, I try to make sure next time we have things set up so we're trying to avoid that, or at least reduce the crying by a huge amount.
Absolutely.
But if it happens day in, day out, no, get out of that restaurant.
Yeah. Or I, you know, if I'm working with a kiddo and they're constantly crying, which, I mean, touch wood, that's it's not something that happens really, but I would be reflecting as myself as a therapist going, why is this happening? How can I support this child so that they feel positively towards coming to me? And if it's a case where it's just not working and I know another therapist that they've gelled with, maybe I'm not the right therapist for the child, and I have to be able to own that and say that as well. And I think another aspect of what you want to watch out for is, you know, sometimes you'll have an SLT who's got a lot of experience who sees the kid and is automatically like, your child has autism, your child has this or that, your child is never going to speak, which it's a rare thing to have an SLT say this child will never speak, but occasionally you do hear parents coming with their experiences of other SLTs saying things like this. And I mean, we hope that they misheard, but we just don't know. But negativity in the therapy room is not something you want for your child. So if you're feeling negativity, then maybe you want to look elsewhere.
And sometimes a speech and language therapist, for example, can't diagnose autism. So they shouldn't say this child has autism unless there's a diagnosis in place. But you can and should flag if there's a possibility.
Yes.
But then you say, listen, I see some red flags, but we need to do some more investigation because it could be something else.
Exactly.
It needs a team approach. And we need a few people to investigate and see, is it something else? Because children change across times and their presentations change and you learn different things. And we all need to put all the puzzle pieces together and make sure we're doing the best thing for the child. But sticking a label on, first off, is not necessarily going to be doing any good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's hard to know, you know, when a parent comes to say, this other person said my child has autism, it's very likely that the SLT said, I'm seeing characteristics of autism that needs to be investigated. But what the parent is hearing is my child's autistic. And so sometimes, you know, SLTs are the bearer of negative possible diagnosis or what you might view as a negative diagnosis. And, you know, and we have to be very careful how we bring this up to parents, but often we are the first person to see a child, and it is our duty to flag any potential issues we might be seeing and encourage an assessment of need or a multidisciplinary evaluation, and not just hide behind the fear of having to say it.
Because ethically we have to.
Yeah.
If we see there might be a difficulty and a child needs support or an adult needs support in something, we need to flag it.
Yeah.
And it's their choice to follow up on it.
Yeah.
But we're saying flagging maybe. It just means investigating. And it can be after investigation go, okay, it's not this, so maybe there's something else behind it. But even sometimes it's good practice to even just go check out the hearing. You know, maybe there's a mild hearing loss.
Yeah.
Always good to have that taken out of the equation, that it is something like that. Those are all good things.
And that's a positive thing when you have an SLT who's saying, I'd really like to look at this aspect and that aspect. I'd like to have an assessment of need for this. What I'm encouraging this, or I'm encouraging you to get a hearing assessment, because we want to rule out anything that's going to be causing a speech and language disorder. And if that's because of fluctuating hearing loss and an audiologist can find that for us, that's going to help us intervene in a better way.
Yeah, exactly. It can change the intervention, therefore change what happens. Yeah. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Go speechies!
If you have any questions,
give us a call.
Send in your questions and we'll try our best to answer them.